Hi everyone, what is up? Welcome back to EdTech Classroom. I'm so happy you're here. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Maddie. I'm a K-5 STEM teacher and EdTech coach in Los Angeles. I post weekly tech tips and tutorial videos for teachers, and like I said, I'm so happy you're here. So today's video is going to be all about how to conduct an election-themed morning meeting. Now, the 2020 presidential election is coming up pretty soon here, and I personally think that morning meeting is the perfect time to teach students about the election process. So like I said, today's video is really going to be focused on how to conduct an election-themed morning meeting. Now, the tips in today's video are going to apply to both an in-person teaching and teaching online. So, whether you're in hybrid learning right now, teaching 100% in person, 100% online, I think that this video is going to have some valuable takeaways for you. So, without further ado, let's get started. If you've been watching my videos for a little while now, you know, first of all, that morning meeting is totally my thing. And second of all, I really love using slides presentations to help provide some structure to my morning meeting. Now, I like to use the responsive classroom morning meeting structure, but basically the way it looks is, we have a greeting, then we have a share portion, an activity, and then a morning message. So because today's morning meeting is going to be election themed, I'm going to walk you through what a potential morning meeting could look like, either on Zoom, Google Meet, or in person. So for the first slide here, we have today is election day. Now this slide is basically acting as a substitute for the morning greeting. So what I have written here is good morning. Today is an important day in our nation's history. It is November 3rd, 2020, and it is election day. Today our country will vote to decide who will be the next president of the United States. Then the next slide introduces students to voting. So I say, what is voting? In the United States, citizens who are 18 years and older have the right and privilege to vote in our elections. Voters will cast their vote on a ballot to help decide who will be elected into an office. Today, we will vote to pick the next president of the United States. So what I really like about this slide is a couple of different things. First, I really like that it introduces students to the concept of voting. We have, a question posed at the top and then an answer that elementary students can closely follow. Now, the next thing I really like about this slide is that I've chosen to bold certain vocabulary words. Now, you'll notice probably that when teaching about the election, there's a ton of vocabulary that elementary students can learn. So I've bolded some keywords that I think that I want students to actually learn about on this slide here. So after I read this slide or I explain what voting is to students, I might then go into a conversation about what these different bolded words might mean. So for example, I might take some time to actually define what the word vote means, or what a ballot is, or what being elected into an office might mean. And then next we'll go on to this slide here that says, why is voting important? So now that students understand what voting actually is, then as a class, we can spend time thinking about why voting is actually important in the United States. So what I have written here is, it is a right to be able to vote in the United States. When people vote, they have the ability to help elect a new leader. In some countries, people do not get to have a say or an opinion on who gets elected, so voting is a privilege. So this is just, again, another great way to introduce students to some new vocabulary related to the election in a way that's very kid-friendly and easy for elementary students to understand. So for the next two slides here, I'm going to introduce students to the candidates. This is kind of up to you how much you want to go into depth as to what these candidates actually stand for. So then next it's time for the share portion of morning meeting. So here it says, if I were elected president of the United States, I would ... Now what I really like about this prompt is it actually gives students an opportunity to think about what they value in a candidate. So of course our elementary students are not able to vote yet, but I still think it's a fun share prompt and activity for students to actually be able to reflect upon what they're possibly looking for in a potential candidate for the president of the United States. Then after students complete the share portion of morning meeting, it's time for an activity. So I've created a fun little voting activity to help students actually practice voting. So here we have activity time. Let's practice voting. Do you prefer salty or sweet? And so if you're teaching this on Zoom, you could have students, let's say everybody has their camera off, okay? So you tell students to turn off their cameras, and you could say, if you prefer salty, please turn on your camera. And so then students can show their face if they prefer salty. Then you can say, okay, turn your cameras off. Then all students can turn their cameras off. And then you can say, if you prefer sweet, please turn your camera on. So this just can kind of be a fun way for students to be able to see who's similar to them in their class, who has similar interests, and it can be a fun way to practice voting. And if in your actual classroom, you can also do this activity by having students just physically raise their hand, or doing different sort of polling activities like that. So again, these are just really fun prompts to help introduce elementary students to the concept of voting in a way that's really safe and positive and healthy for them based off of their age. So next we have another one. It says, do you prefer indoors or outdoors? And another one, do you prefer morning or evening? And lastly, do you prefer sunshine or snow? So I think, again, these 4 activities are just a fun way to build classroom community while also introducing students to the concept of voting. Next, we have the morning message. So here on this morning message page here, it says, the presidential election comes once every 4 years. Today is a historic day. Even though you are not old enough to vote yet, you can still practice your rights by spreading awareness about the importance of voting. So what I like about this slide is that it sort of gives students some agency, right? So even though our students aren't old enough to actually vote in the election, they can still spread awareness about the importance of voting. So in this presentation here, in this morning meeting, I did not disclose to students what my personal political views were. I did not ask students to tell me their views, but instead I really attempted to provide a presentation that would help educate students about the concept of voting, about what the election process actually looks like. So again, I think this is just a nice way to be able to provide students with agency so they can understand how important the election actually is and how important it is for us to be able to vote. So if you're teaching in person, you can create an election ballot box kind of like this one. I made it just really quickly using an old Amazon box. And then you can have an actual physical ballot for students to fill out, kind of like this one, that they can put in the anonymous election ballot box. Now in this example here, you'll see that I have the presidential candidates listed on the actual ballot, but if you're teaching a different grade level and you don't want students to actually vote on a presidential candidate, you can still have them practice voting by, voting on something like what's your favorite ice cream flavor, or what's your favorite season, or something like that. So this is just one example of how you can actually conduct a mock election in your classroom. So here you'll see that I have a 2020 presidential election ballot for students to complete. So it asks them which candidate they'd like to vote for. Then students can make their selection, and then when they click the next button, it will then take them to a page with a digital I voted sticker and a place for them to actually submit their ballot. So again, what I really like about Google Forms is it allows you to still be able to conduct a mock election even when you're teaching remotely. So if you're considering doing something related to the 2020 presidential election and you're teaching online, I'd highly recommend you use Google Forms as one of your tech tools. Thank you so much for watching today's tech tutorial. I hope you enjoyed learning about how to conduct an election-themed morning meeting, both in person and online. If you liked this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. And I'll see you back here soon. Bye, friends.